So I've spent about 14 years working in the IT industry, and the majority of that has been based on deploying and maintaining solutions on-prem. Now, over the last few years, I've started to delve into cloud technologies and specifically Azure. And what I'm finding is the things that I learned on-prem are still very valuable. So on-prem, I had to deal with backups. So I had to back up IaaS virtual machines. I have to do that in Azure as well. On-prem, I had to design disaster recovery. So I had to make sure that if something really bad happened to the workloads that my organisation held on-prem, they were protected. I have to do that in Azure as well. I have to anticipate something going wrong and have a solution in place to mitigate against that. I also have to often install operating systems on virtual machines and build out what happens with them and monitor them. And I have to do that in the cloud as well. So my skill set that I learned all those years before are still very valuable within the cloud. Yes, I am having to learn new technologies and new ways of doing things, but ultimately I'm taking my existing skill set, adding, expanding and adapting that and moving forward with the cloud. So if you're on that cloud journey, please don't be frightened of it. Take it as an opportunity for career growth and enjoy.
Hey everybody, it's Jay. Welcome back to AzureFunBytes. It's great to have you here. And what do we do every week? You know, I ask you this every single time. And the answer remains the same. We get together, we have an opportunity to talk about all the different services, all the different products, and the complementary services from other vendors that help make up a really great experience with Azure. So I want to get started by saying very much a huge thank you to the people over at Hello World who line me up every week. This week I saw Nitya and I saw April and lots of great people, Jen Looper. You know, these people are incredible. They get together and do the things that I like to do is they talk about how technology can help you grow, whether it's personally or your business or, you know, just a fun project that you're working on. And so this week, I want to talk to you about one of the things that Sarah actually just gave a little information on. And that's if you have multiple environments. And multiple environments could require maybe something on the top of it to take a look, to keep their eyes open and see what exactly is going on to your different deployments, be them in a data center, the Azure cloud, or maybe some other cloud. But I'm hoping you're in Azure first. So in order to get into what we're going to be talking about, and I want to introduce you to my guest, who's really great. He's been on before. His name is Ryan MacLean. I want you to take a look at this and learn a little bit more about Datadog. And hey, here we are, and here's my guest, Ryan. How are you today, Ryan?
Not too bad at all, Jay. Thanks for having me back. This is awesome. That intro is phenomenal, by the way. I don't think my slides or content can add up to that, but hopefully I can provide some more detail.
Well, you know, I wanted to remind everyone, Ryan's been on before, and I'm really lucky I'm getting his time again. I want to thank the people over at Datadog for helping facilitate another session between the two of us. Manuela was really great. I know she's in New York City also, so I applaud her for that. I know it's not much to applaud someone for, but I'm very, very loving of my hometown. So Ryan, the last time you were on was August of last year, and here we were having a chat. I have since hit the gym, but that's neither here nor there. But a lot has changed, in a little under like 10 months. We've seen the world get more complex. We've added all these complexities to the different things that we have to be part of, how we work, what we work on, the environments that we have to pay attention to. And one of the things that the product that you focus on, Datadog, does is help give you, in that world of complexity, some sort of insight into everything. And that's why I really wanted to have you back on. But before we get into product, I want to talk a little bit about you.
All right.
You're a developer advocate with Datadog. How'd you get here?
Long journey. I've been in the industry for about 20 years at this point in time. I worked with companies large and small, did some consulting, did some Mac work, some Linux work, some Windows work. Got my MCSE a while ago. Just sort of went through kind of the multi-architecture, deployment types on-prem, working for small and medium businesses. And then when the cloud kind of came around, I jumped on that. Having been I went through university and did programming there, but most of the time I was doing scripting and things like that. And it was kind of fun to be able to see the industry take on marrying at least coding skills and ops skills together. So as DevOps in the cloud rose up, I also got sort of swept up in that stream as well, and joined a company, Samsung, for a bit there, and dealt with some stuff at scale, and kind of trial by fire, sink or swim. And learned a lot of stuff about the cloud, what it means to have a lot of users online, and how to handle them, as well as moving some of your stuff, some of your sensitive data that might be on-prem to the cloud, keeping some of it on-prem, handling BI, that kind of stuff. So lots of different and interesting problems. And then Datadog, I've been using it for 10 years. So when I landed here, it was kind of great to be able to talk about something that I'm really passionate about, not just monitoring, but this product in particular. Yeah, go ahead.
I know Ilan Rabinovich, he's been one of those people that has really seen Datadog grow from almost like the beginning. And how your team has been able to reach people to be able to give that information. And so, like myself, I used to travel a lot, and you probably did the same. And advocacy for people like ourselves has really changed. Like I said, the world's become more complex. How have you made that shift since the last time we spoke?
Yeah, I mean, obviously I haven't been hitting the gym as much as you have, but a lot of it's been webinars, things like that. Conference talks are virtual only, so there's a lot of trying to figure out what the hallway track looks like, how to connect to the community when there aren't in-person meetups, or what like a virtual meetup might look like. So a lot of sort of figuring out how to engage people and get them interested about not just our product, but honestly about monitoring and observability in general, and just talking about what that means as you're working through, like, hey, are VPN connections more important during this new like work from home kind of thing, or is it more like SOX proxies or something like that? Like, what's actually the pain point right now, and how can we help, or what can the industry do to help? Because things change pretty quickly, and a lot of IT teams and IS teams, DevOps teams had to change the way they worked overnight. So it's been quite interesting.
Yeah, I think that's been a really good point about how teams have changed, because people are covering shifts differently. There might have been someone that had to go into the office every day to do their job, and obviously now they're more than likely working from home, and that's given people flexibility to have the ability to maybe enjoy life a little bit more. I can't speak for everybody, but I know that being off the road and not having to go someplace every single day, and being focused here and having some structure in my life, and that's just me, how I thrive. It's made it so that I feel a lot more comfortable, say, than I did back last April or May.
Right.
And hey, like I was saying before, it's been August, lots have changed. Even where I'm broadcasting from has changed. I'm in a new apartment here in Brooklyn as opposed to being in Manhattan, but still here in the greatest city in the world. So why don't you tell everybody where you're located?
I'm in Vancouver, Canada. Maybe not the greatest city in the world, but it's pretty nice. We got mountains, we got the ocean. It's not bad at all, but definitely pretty warm today. I got the AC on, so if it's too loud, let me know. But yeah, it's been great to have sort of things like the weather being nicer, getting outside more, that kind of stuff is really helping the mood, at least here. So definitely enjoying the fact that summer's come. It looks like things are starting to open up, that kind of stuff. So it's great. It definitely helps.
Yeah, the world's definitely opening back up again, and I hope we do get to see each other again in these like different venues. Datadog is always out there when there are big live events. I remember the last one. I think I saw some people would say, I think there might have been someone at DevOps Days in New York City. I can't recall, but that was the last event I went to. I went to some Microsoft Ignite, like on the tour, but I was at the big one in Orlando, and that was great. It's really cool to know that at some point we're going to get back to it.
Definitely. I mean, I just watched Build, I think it was last week. It was phenomenal. And it just felt to me like it's great to be able to do all the time zones and things like that. But it also felt like being in person would have been awesome. There were so many attendees, just the energy and the vibe that you get from the in-person experience is great.
That hallway track to me remains really important.
Yeah.
I thrive on relationships and I want to just see people and hear them and talk about whether their success stories, and I want to hear their failures also. And that leads me into a really good part is that when there is failure that happens in, say, different environments in the cloud, on-prem, you name it, Datadog helps throw some visibility on the events that have occurred throughout the process, from the beginning to the middle to the end of the failure that might have happened. And so I want to talk a little bit more about that. But before I do, I want to remind everyone, as usual, we have a poll. And that poll is asking this week, are you currently using Datadog to monitor your deployments? If you are, please head over to aka.ms/LearnTV. That's our first place that you can vote from. You can also use that to leave questions and comments, or if you're in one of your, the native ones such as Twitch or YouTube, you can always leave comments in those chats as well. I can see them. You can see, hey, hello, welcome back. Who's watching? Let us know. You can tell us in YouTube, you can tell us in Twitch, and you can even use the chat there. And so one of the other things I want to remind people of is that you can go ahead and sign up for Datadog. So if you are super, super excited, and even before you've heard about anything yet, you can go and sign up for free. There's this URL, I'll put it in the chat as well. Head over there and give Datadog a shot. So let's talk a little bit about, failure. Customers are going to deal with failure no matter what.
Yep.
There's no there's no computing environment that's immune to some sort of service degradation at some point. How do you talk to your customers about how to, say, prepare for that in the context of monitoring and observability?
Yeah, I think maybe culturally, and it's not an out, I'll get to the technical stuff as well, but culturally, the main thing is to set up like guardrails or safety nets to allow you to have safe failure. So as you said, failure will happen, and every failure, to me at least, is an opportunity for improvement or like a learning lesson. So what can we learn from things? What are the things that we want to repair or look at when we get to there? Some of the things I hope to get to today at the demo side is like what incident management looks like. And this is more of a workflow that doesn't need to be Datadog specific, but if you're setting yourself up to be able to handle a failure when it happens, it could be something as simple as like an undersea cable being severed, right? That happens. A backhoe has certainly happened to me, might have happened to you. Those kind of like on-call disasters that you have, right? Just to give a talk about a podcast that I used to love, but those things happen. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was saying, on-call nightmares seems like a lifetime ago for me.
That was phenomenal. But for me, so some of those stories tell you that a lot of the failure that happens, it might be your fault for sure, but a lot of the times it could be external to your team. It might be something to do with an upstream dependency. Sometimes it can be a downstream dependency that like a provider that you're using or something that the client may hit as well as your service. So a lot of the times it's that the goal is to start cataloging and start writing down the metrics that are important during the failure so that the next time it happens, you can start making sure that you see it before it happens. So if there's something indicating that a failure may happen before it starts, like something like TCP retransmit or something like that, if you see it like or NTUs or fragmentation or something like this starts happening, you know, hey, something's going on.
Mm-hmm.
We need to start preparing for this because it could be bad. It's not bad yet. This is more of an informational alert as opposed to a wake up at 2 a.m. kind of thing, but we might want to know about. So the main thing for us is to allow people to start cataloging and writing down what they've got right away, sharing it with the team, and doing things like ITSM, ITIL, like deciding who the incident commander is, that kind of thing, going through those workflows to get your team set up to document what's currently happening and then learn from that once it's over. So what that post-mortem or what that retrospective looks like is already essentially set up as you're going along. So you've got a timeline happening. So it's really key. Like, I don't know about you, but a lot of the failures that I had early on in my career, it was kind of like, we'll write it down after it's done because it's a file alarm fire here. We've get everyone hands on deck into a war room, that kind of thing, look at everything at the same time. And then afterwards, you're in a Word document or you're in SharePoint or a wiki. You're writing things down, trying to recall, going through chat logs, maybe emails, that kind of stuff. So making that a little bit easier is one of the things that's very important to DevOps as an industry. It's very important for us to start cataloging this as we go along and then making it easier to learn and action those things. Because the other thing that would happen is like a month passes, the incident's long and done and dusted. It's almost forgotten at this point in time. But then you've got like quarterly goals and things like that. And you're thinking back to the incident, like, hey, what did we need to fix? Did we write it down? Did we remember what that thing was? Was it a DNS issue? Did we need to overload it? That kind of stuff. All those things. The more you start basically writing those down as it happens, the easier it is to start setting those goals ahead of time and then start deciding, hey, do I need to like work this into my error budget for SLOs, or do I need to have like a downtime budget for this quarter that's larger than last? That kind of stuff. So just getting it done. Sorry, I'm blabbing on here, but this stuff's really important to me. Making sure that you record it as it's happening and dedicating someone on the team or a couple people on the team to help with that.
Yeah, incident response, I think, is one of the things, and management for that matter, that point. Like, you know, it's important to know how you respond, but the actual management of the situation and having, say, like an incident commander and someone that's the messenger, someone that's actually making sure that everything is documented. You know, these are important aspects of operations, and I think that we forget that, you know, ops did not always have these tools. There was not always, you know, the Slack or Teams to be able to send you notifications. And then for the most part, incidents were reported a lot of times by your end users. Right. You know, you would get that email saying, hey, this isn't working. Or you would find out because eventually, you know, maybe different social mediums would start sharing like, hey,
that's the worst feeling. Yeah, when you're trending on Twitter due to an outage, it's terrible.
And what it really comes down to, and you know, this is something that Anna from Gremlin, who I know you've all partnered with Gremlin.
She's awesome. Yeah,
I love Anna. You know, she's talked to me about how reputation becomes an important part of what this processing, the availability of your application or your website. It represents what you as a business are concerned with doing, and that builds a reputation. If someone expects to be able to purchase something from your website every single time, or watch a video, or whatever it may be, every single time, that expectation is going to be pretty high. They're not going to reduce it either. People, once they have expectations of what service levels are supposed to be like, they rarely go down into a lower level and say, okay, yeah, I can deal with a little bit of downtime. But let's be honest, no one can deal with a little bit of downtime, not by choice. You know, maybe if you have game days and you're planning it within the world of chaos engineering, sure. But general downtime, nobody wants that.
Yeah, I think that's a really good call out. Like the game days or the failure Fridays or whatever you want to call them, being able to run through a scenario where you've maybe seen a failure before or a partial failure, or maybe it was a near miss the last time it happened, actually going through and saying, hey, what if our SSL cert expired? Or what if the DNS record was incorrect? What if the IP had changed or the VIP had changed? What if? And actually starting to learn from those processes and changing the way maybe you deploy or the way that you rotate keys or the way that you actually get things done to DNS if you're using like Azure DNS, for example, what that looks like is very important, because then you can start building out a run book. And when it comes down to the 2 a.m., 3 a.m. call, I'm sure you've had these as well. Like you've got a run book in front of you, so you can at least say, hey, the last time I was here, sleepyhead me, can't remember, but the last time I was here, I've got a checklist that I wrote that I can actually walk through and try these things first. Because chances are it's one of these things or it's related to one of these things, if the symptoms are either similar or the same.
And run books are important. Run books can be sometimes the lifeblood of an incident. Being able to know what to go to, what are the key systems to check out in the case, or what's the glue to everything.
Yeah, can't agree more. Now, they're not set in stone. Like back in the day, I used to make them PDFs, like read only, that kind of thing. I think these days, a lot of what you want is a starting point. So being able to edit the runbook live, like, the last time I came here, it's this, here's the incident, a link to it, that kind of thing. Because I think for me, at least, when I started off, is like, no, the runbook's like this, it should be exactly like this. And then the question is, if it's the same every time, maybe we should start automating what we can in this process. Or maybe there needs to be a ticket created out of this, some work item taken out of this to make it automated so you don't have to do it next time. But being able to like at least catalog those things, or having the failure modes recorded is super, super handy. So at least giving you that starting point. So I think things may have changed a little bit from back in the day, from things being set in stone to being a lot more kind of living document era is definitely handy. But it's certainly better than nothing, which is not good.
Absolutely. And so logging and the aggregation of that logs, that tends to be a really big part of all this. So tell me, are your customers dealing with like terabytes of logs and information? Like how are you all managing to be able to ingest so much and provide all the information you are?
Yeah, so the answer here is like yes and. So yes, we've certainly got clients who have a ton of logs. We've also got smaller clients who are just getting started out that have logs that are very, they wouldn't necessarily pattern match. So the more logs you have, the easier it is for us to go through and start running, I could say AI, but imagine machine learning. So we're looking at the pattern analysis, trying to figure out what an outlier is, or what a pattern looks like, or what the bulk of your logs is. So the answer is, in terms of the growth, hand clap to Azure, honestly, being able to provide us the way to grow with our clients. So having cloud services that we can build on is instrumental in our success. So as our clients grow, we can grow with them. So we like to say we have logging without limits. So you can send as much as you want to us. But same token, if you want to send a tiny amount for just your dev logs, we can handle those too. The main thing I think is important for us is that we can actually take those logs and ingest them, but we can also re-ingest them. So if you want to, say, only have a week full of logs and have something in an Azure Blob Store and then re-ingest that, we'll handle that as well. So if you want to do something like going through historical stuff to say like, hey, this time last year, what did that look like? I don't need to have this all online, but when it comes down to quarterly report, how are we doing, that kind of stuff? What are the roll-up metrics? We can kind of handle both. So again, cloud services, massive deal when it comes to being able to handle a ton of logs. Things like Azure Blob Storage, so a way to be able to throw things into one storage. It's not necessarily like set in stone. So back in my day, like storage was you get 10 terabytes and that's it. Now you have to write a purchase order to get more. In the cloud, it's a lot easier to say, hey, the storage just grows as we need it. It's relatively cheap compared to going through that whole PO process. Sorry, I say PO, but purchase order process. So going through finance, getting things.
Sure. Nobody wants to requisition cloud anymore.
No,
people want
anymore. No.
Just knowing like, hey, here are your purchase limits around some of this stuff. Let's set up some budgets.
And you got to set some guidelines. Yeah.
I used a key word there, budgets, and talk to me a little bit about SLOs and error budgets and how those impact the process of using something like Datadog.
Yeah. So we talked a little bit about incidents, and one of the things about incidents that a lot of people talk about. So the runbook is great until it's not great, right? The next time it happens, it's probably going to be a little bit different. And what you can start doing is seeing things that are maybe it's almost like a service level indicator. So like what tells me what my service level should be? So just to pick one, for example, if the page takes a second to load, maybe that's normal. Maybe 10 seconds is abnormal. So something like the page load might be interesting to me. Another one might be a little bit more complicated, maybe more of like a business metric. So like how long does it take to log in as opposed to how long does it take to load the page? Because there's one thing is like, hey, the site's up, and it's like, yeah, it's up, but I can't check out anything from my cart because I can't log in. So those aren't the same thing. So things like Black Friday, great example. So when it happens, there's so many people trying to hit a site at the same time. You're trying to scale. Maybe you've got microservices. Maybe the checkout's one of them. Maybe the page is another. So maybe the page is loading fine, but the checkout's not keeping up to the growth that you're seeing, the surge that's happening as people are trying to check things out. So it's key to sort of figure out during these game days or during these outages that you have, as you're learning, what's key during these times. Is it the site loading? Can I degrade the site itself so that maybe it doesn't have all the animated movies, but it still loads and it's loading pictures from something like a CDN, so like a content delivery network that's closer to the user, but not necessarily the full site. So maybe something like my calendar picker might not be working properly, but the rest of the site is, so you can kind of get there. What I'm trying to say is, like, as you grab these SLIs, you can start breaking them down and deciding, hey, these are important, and they roll up into a service level objective. So the site should load within 1 second, could be one of them. You should be able to log in within 10 seconds, could be another one. And those things could be something like, hey, I'm using Azure AD. When I log in, not only does the login page need to work, but I also need to check to make sure Azure AD is working at the same time. So that test could be a little bit more involved than simply loading the page. You might need something a little bit more interactive, like actually logging in and checking those metrics and actually like looking at that trace and saying, hey, this was the login page, this is Azure AD, and this is us going back to the login page and it handling it, kind of thing. Because those processes are a little bit more complicated than just clicking the login button, unfortunately.
Sure. Well, you've given us a lot to think about so far. And we've got more time. We've got some demos to come up with and things like that. But I want to remind everybody that there is a poll, and you can take that poll right now. Why don't you head over to aka.ms/LearnTV, same place you can ask some questions. And today we're asking, are you currently using Datadog to monitor your deployments? If you are, let us know. We'd love to hear. And then also I want to remind everybody that if you want to also get some more education around some of these things, and we'll be talking about Azure Kubernetes Service. There's a learning path around Kubernetes. Head over to Microsoft Learn. Free education. It's gamified, so you can see I'm at level 10. I got about 25,000 experience points, so I still have a little bit more to level up for my next spell. I hope I get it soon. I want to be able to cast Magic Missile or something like that. Anyway, Ryan, so you've got some stuff to show me today, and I'd love to start with that. So I'm going to bring up your screen if that's okay.
Yeah, by all means. And just to give a bit of a preamble here, so this is sort of the talk that I gave at Build. Now I've cut it down a little bit so it doesn't cover all the stuff because there is quite a bit of content. But one of the main things, at least on this slide, is to talk about the fact that we not only can help you monitor on-prem, but also most of the services in Azure, we essentially integrate to Azure services directly in order to start getting those metrics into Datadog via a read-only integration. So what we can do is start grabbing things essentially through Azure into Datadog. Now, in the past, you used to have to set up a service principal in order to get things like Azure Functions set up, that kind of thing. I'll show a few more of these here just to show off a little bit, but we've got Cosmos DB in all the flavors that it runs. Things like Azure SQL databases. SQL's, of course, very popular in Azure. We're happy to help there. And App Service as well has been a big hit for us. One of the main things that we offer in App Service is having deep visibility into things like .NET traces if you're using App Service. So what we can do is actually get that tracing pretty much automatically as long as you add the extension to your App Service. Now, I think I mentioned the service principal and the onboarding before. It used to be a bit of a manual process. You could do it through the Azure Shell or using Azure CLI if you wanted to. But I just wanted to give a quick demo of what that looks like now. Hopefully the res is okay, but basically through Marketplace, I'm using dark mode here because I love dark mode in Azure. But essentially through Marketplace, just in that search bar there, you can just type in Datadog. And on the bottom, what I'm going to do is click on the Marketplace offering. Now, there's two different types. So if you've already got Datadog, you can link it to Azure. And if you're new to Datadog, you can actually link Datadog to Azure and set it all up in one fell swoop. So you can do everything basically together. Now I'll cover that creating a new resource here just to sort of talk about. Now this is my personal account, so you can see here, please ignore the dev test IDs, that kind of stuff. But basically what I did was just define my resource group to be my default, gave it a resource name of Azure Datadog, that kind of thing. You can see the locations right now are just US2, West US2, sorry. And you can see here that there's a Datadog site, that kind of thing. So it's essentially a couple clicks, you're good to go. Now it goes through the metrics and logs. If you want to restrict this to a certain subscription or maybe something specific to a tag, so you only want to grab the dev stuff, you only want to grab staging or prod, you can do that as well via tagging. And then in here, we were talking a little bit about logging, but being able to grab those Azure logs, those two checkboxes will start sending them off to Datadog for you. And again, if you want to omit logs, you can certainly do that too. So this is just the integration. It's all within the Azure portal. And in here, the single sign-on, I think I touched on it a little bit, but basically what you can do is actually log into Datadog using your Azure AD credentials. So the same credentials that you use to log into Azure portal, we can actually use to start logging on to Azure. Logging on to Azure, Datadog, my bad. So basically it's one sign-on. You don't have to worry about other password expiration rules or anything like that. It's kind of rolled in together. We can stop here for the screen sharing, but basically the main thing I wanted to talk about is that the onboarding process is quite a bit better than it was before. Previous to this, I think the last time we talked, it was service principal, that kind of thing. And we were kind of working on the marketplace stuff, but if you already had Datadog, onboarding that way was a little bit difficult to link the two, so you still needed to go through the service principal stuff. And now we've got sort of those two paths. So if you're a new Datadog client, by all means, sign up, link the two. If you're not, by all means, you can do both at the same time. It's sort of up to you. And what I really like as sort of that IT admin kind of person who had to do the SAML or OAuth config in the past, the fact that we've got that wizard in there for you to set up the integration to allow you to sign in is phenomenal to me, because I know it can be a little bit more difficult, a lot more hoops to jump through to get your IDP set up to allow that kind of login, that seamless login. Because you do worry about onboarding, right? You want to be able to bring on new people onto your team very quickly, get them signed into everything, get them into the monitoring, get them into the infrastructure, be able to do on-prem, cloud, what have you, all together.
Now, this is a really cool one. The fact that we can get our agents for our VMs installed right through an extension, and not having to worry about configuring that service principal. Also, just a tremendous boost for someone that's a new user, because I do remember the process of getting it configured with a service principal, creating a trust, and then having to apply that to my Datadog account. It was a little bit much to work with. And I think that overhead tends to be the place where we get scared of services, because when we say, well, I have to install this, I have to configure that, I have to, grab this credential and bring it over here, it can feel like a lot of work. And so it's really nice to see that Datadog has looked at that kind of process and said, let's simplify it for our users.
Yeah, you got it. And I think we're not alone, right? The key is you want to get, if you are in crisis mode and you realize that there is maybe a blind area or an area that you hadn't looked at before, a failure mode that you hadn't seen before, you need to get that stuff right away. We want to be there for you. So the goal is to get you set up as quickly as possible. So whatever we can do to make that burden lower, the better. You mentioned the extension. So I used to work at a company called Finning just before Datadog. So Finning's kind of like the Caterpillar of Canada. And one of the main early wins for us was being able to add that extension to a resource group, so that as things like I think it's a VM scale set is how you expand and contract your VMs within the system. And the fact of the matter is as we were expanding or contracting, the agent would not be installed. So what we did was we added the extension to the resource group, and as they deployed, we get them. So be it Windows, be it Linux, it didn't matter. They get installed, which was phenomenal for us for observability, because that's what we were doing. Scaling during the day, making sure that we got everything on there. We had a lot of stuff, right? Like SQL, you name it, up in the cloud. It was phenomenal for us to be able to get started quickly during an incident to see what was going on. And then after that, you can sign up for a trial and do it that way and kind of get the intelligence that you need to. But after that, it's pretty much smooth sailing. We just went full hog with Datadog. It was much easier.
Sounds really good. So we've got about 25 minutes left in the show. And so I know you got some demos to show us. So I'd love to take a look.
Yeah, no problem. Let me see if I can key that up here. All right, so what I was talking about build was AKS on Azure Stack HCI. So imagine that you've got on-prem, you've got a few servers in a cluster, and on top of those servers, you've got virtual machines. You're probably sharing storage and networking as well. And then on top of that platform, you'd have AKS. So just like you'd have in Azure Cloud, you could have Kubernetes Service Managed. You could also have it on-prem as well. So I set up a small lab at home trying to figure out how this is set up. I think it went GA during build, which is pretty exciting. So I think this sort of hybrid area is where we're going to see a lot of development in the coming year, where people have a pocket of things that they might still have on-prem, but they also want to run some of that in the cloud and kind of monitor both at the same time. And that's honestly where we come into play. I know, Jay, Arc is also one of those things that Microsoft is like, it doesn't matter where your compute is, we'll come to you kind of thing. So for us, looking at Arc is kind of very similar to how we think about monitoring. So we want to come to you, meet you where you are, and help you monitor things. So with that basic kind of platform with your servers, your storage, your virtual machines, Azure Kubernetes Service, we want to say that we can monitor all of it for you. So we've recently recently handled npm monitoring for Windows servers as well. And on those servers in Azure Stack HCI, you've got Hyper-V. We had native support for Hyper-V already, so being able to watch those VMs is critical. And basically in this case, so you can get the servers, the virtual machines, the storage, and networking, Azure Kubernetes Service, which we already integrate with. And you could have something similar to this. So imagine that you've got a scenario with 3 environments. So you've got like a dev, a staging, and a prod. And what we're going to be doing is talking about like what that staging to prod migration looks like. Or it could be like maybe what the on-prem to cloud migration looks like. And a lot of it is figuring out what those metrics are on-prem versus what the metrics in the cloud might be in terms of importance. Or maybe it's backwards. Maybe you've got some stuff in the cloud that you actually want to integrate with on-prem things that are sensitive, maybe for different regulatory compliance reasons, that kind of thing. So basically we want to say that, hey, we can monitor both for you. I mentioned network monitoring a little bit here. So I want to take the screenshot just to show off a little bit, but essentially you can see that there's a management host, which is essentially what's running everything. So it was virtual on virtual. On top of that management host, I had a Windows 2019 node, as well as the Azure Stack HCI node. And furthermore, I had the domain controller. And what I noticed was that everything, of course, would talk to the domain controller in order to log in, very similar to what you'd see on-prem. So as you log into things like Azure Stack, it would actually talk to the DC. You can kind of see that in this flow diagram. Now, on the top left, I've got a Raspberry Pi that was running some Azure IoT stuff as well, just sort of show that the whole network can be monitored at the same time, not just the Windows machines, but that is new, so I did want to talk about it. Now, the sample code I was talking about, I've got a couple links here. They're not too important for this one, but just to set the stage in terms of what we're talking about. So when we go through a lot of our workshops, we'll talk about like an e-com site, so an e-commerce site. We talked a little bit about going through the checkout process, that kind of thing, and I've cribbed those notes basically from that talk. So basically, when you're running an e-commerce site, there's a lot more to it than just showing that first page. There's a lot more to a page loading than just the web server. There can often be like a middleware or maybe an API server, maybe multiple API servers in a microservice environment. You could have a database, many databases, the database clusters, some state basically in the backend. You end up, often it's a lot more complicated than just a 3-tier architecture that we've seen before. In Azure, you get things like load balancer, you might have front door, you might have an API gateway. There's a lot of different services that come into play. But essentially what we want to say is, when it comes down to deploying something like this, to look at what the infrastructure or application or microservices monitoring could be, we give you a way to get started with it. So you can download this repo and look at it. It's very similar, I think, to the Microsoft example code bases, where you can go through the samples and kind of look at what they would look like in Azure Cloud, and then figuring out what your monitoring needs might be. So for us, this website, we called it Store Dog because we like puns, but basically we sell some cool hats with dogs on them, that kind of thing. But essentially it's just a site that runs, you can go through checkouts, you can buy cool hats like Jay and I have. And essentially what you do is when you're going through the site, once you've done your first deploy, and I'll cut this demo a little bit short, but basically what you want to do is hit the site. So I've deployed it in dev. Is the site running? Can I actually go to the site and check it? So I talked a little bit before about SSL tests and API tests, and a little bit more about the browser test. So when we talked about the checkout, that kind of thing, we allow you to synthetically hit your website, be it in dev, staging, or prod, and actually go through that checkout process and make sure it's working. So don't just say, hey, site's up, job done, problem solved kind of thing, but actually check it as you deploy through. And maybe more importantly, as you deploy it, if there are problems, you can do things like rollback. So you can see that there was a problem here. And in fact, if I change this time frame, you can kind of see that actually there's quite a few problems. So I was just looking at a narrow slice of time, but actually it looks like every time I deploy, there's an issue. And I can tell that there are issues by like time to first byte or time to interactive for the site. So even though it loaded, I need to be able to scroll the site or maybe click on buttons. Until I can do that, the site's not actually loaded. So it's a little bit different than just taking a screenshot and saying, hey, the site's loaded. So what we do is we go through the whole site and sort of click on links, that kind of stuff, take screenshots as we go through, but like prove it to me. So like site was up, you clicked around, show me what happened. And that's kind of what we do is we give you screenshots for each one. You can see on the right-hand side, there's time bars saying like what area of the process took the longest. You can see one of these took 14 seconds. So like chairs, I think was the category that wasn't loading right. And you got lighting, same thing. The main key here is that just because you've deployed something, you need to start then testing it. And the test can be site loaded or ports alive, but a lot of times the business wants something more like a business metric. So if your business metric is daily active users, those users need to log in. If your business metric is daily unique users, then you need to get into time interactive so that your scripts can run to tell you that the user is unique. If it's something like checkouts per day or amount added to cart, if that's a metric that you're doing, if it's week over week, month over month, year over year, you'll want to actually go all the way down into that. And furthermore, I talked a little bit about my time at Samsung, but one of the main things that we had was just because the site's loading for me from my test location doesn't mean when the user goes to load the site that it's actually working properly. So let's say you're on mobile and you're trying to load, like, I don't know, maybe there's a sneaker drop and you really want this pair of sneakers and you want to get
I need my new Dunk Lows from
you got to get your kicks, right? Yeah, so when you're in there, or maybe it's like, hey, there's stock on PlayStation 5 or a new Xbox Series X, that kind of thing. You want to get in there and get at the cart right away. The key that we found out is that when you're loading the site on mobile, if you can actually load some telemetry with the site load, you can start reporting back on what the user actually saw as opposed to what your synthetic metrics saw. So once you deploy it into production, you can start deploying this out to users. And it might depend on location, like maybe they're in an elevator, that kind of thing. So it could be an outlier. Maybe we're talking about the 99th percentile here. It's not most users, but the median here might be that, hey, they're in India, they're on a Samsung tablet, and actually our images are loaded from North America. And in fact, it's causing this site to load a second longer than it needs to. So this it's a bad example. I picked a bad one. So the font and the images don't necessarily serve the Indian market in this case as well as they should. Probably want to look like something at a CDN, getting something closer to the users so when they go to load the site, it doesn't take so long to load. Because on mobile, 1 second can be way, way too long for the user. They expect things to load very quickly. And a lot of that time, progressive loading of the site can really help, and loading resources that are closer to the users. So I'm just going through tags here and just showing like all the information that you get from these sessions, but you can get a lot of information about what the user session actually looked like. And it could just be in your test environment. Maybe it's not in your prod environment, but it's giving you that, not only the synthetic view, but also the real-time view of what you've deployed. And this can be in Azure, it can be in AKS, it can be in Azure Stack, it can be in Azure Arc enabled environments, it can be on-prem, it's kind of up to you. But as you're loading these resources, giving you more of that front-end view in order to start grabbing those SLIs, so when it comes down to the incident that you know what the indicator was, like, hey, site wasn't loading properly for mobile users. We need to start tracking this. We need to start looking into it.
So let me give you a moment to breathe.
Yeah, sorry, I can talk a while.
No, it's okay. I want to just give you a chance. And I'll remind everyone we've got a poll today. I'd love to hear whether or not you're using Datadog to monitor your deployments. And if you want to give us an answer, you can head over to our site for LearnTV. So it's aka.ms/LearnTV. And I want to say thanks to all of our LearnTV viewers, especially all of you who may have stuck around after Hello World. And not only that, but I'd love you to sign up for Datadog. So you've heard so much about Datadog, and if you'd like to sign up for it, you can go to this bit.ly right here. It's also in the chat. You can head over there, sign up for free, give it a test environment, maybe if you want to start playing with it, and then move forward. And then one other thing that I want you to remember is there's free Azure education. Where? Over at Microsoft Learn. We talked about it a few minutes ago. You get your experience points, you level up, become a wizard, or maybe some sort of dragon slayer of Kubernetes clusters and things like that. You can do that all with Microsoft Learn. It's really fun and it's free. Always good to get free stuff on the internet. I love my free stuff on the internet. And so the next thing I want you to tell me a little bit about are these dashboards, because I think that the dashboards really set the table for the power of what Datadog really is.
Yeah, you got it, especially in something like AKS, where you're probably deploying containers, but chances are you've got not just your containers, but a lot of other integration points that you need. Maybe it's a partner. Chances are it's something natively available in Azure. So for my example, Cosmos DB is something we used a lot with AKS. So being able to have that state outside of Kubernetes was very important to us as we roll through different cluster versions. So what you might start with, we talked about the SLS, you might start collecting those and grabbing different pieces of metrics, and then you realize, oh, hey, there's a bunch of built-in dashboards. How do I marry the two? How do I get that SLI in there into that dashboard so I can start looking at the whole picture and then picking out the pieces from maybe the AKS side that I need to watch? It could be something like out of memory checker, that kind of thing. So that the essential, the crux of what I want to get across here is that we've got a bunch of defaults. We talked about, I think it was 450 plus integrations at this point in time. A lot of those are Azure and Microsoft integrations. I'm not sure if you've noticed, Jay, but there's a lot of products coming out of Microsoft.
Yeah,
it's sometimes fun to keep up, right?
We got a couple of two, three things, as we say around here, just a couple, 2, 3 things to keep your eyes on. And for every new service, it's an opportunity for a vendor like yourself to say, you know what, let's cover that service. Let's make sure that our users can integrate that into their dashboard.
Definitely. And we talked about bigger shops as well as smaller shops. There's always the thing like, do I want to run this, or would I rather have Azure run this because it's managed kind of thing? Or maybe in dev I want to manage, but maybe in prod I want to manage it myself, that kind of thing. So Kubernetes, I think the big hit here is like AKS. A lot of people would prefer Microsoft to run Kubernetes for them instead of doing it the quote unquote hard way. So that the main thing is we want to be able to help you if you're running on your own, if you're doing the managed service, or if you're doing a combination of both with hybrid. If it's an ARC, that said, we want to be able to grab all that stuff together. So the key is that you can take those default dashboards that we have out of the box. They're set to go. As soon as you get the integration up and running, you've got the data. You can start plotting that data. Once you've got the data, basically taking those dashboards and starting to add things in. So if you've not seen Datadog before, this is kind of what the default Kubernetes dashboard looks like. So this is out of the box. I'll skip by the next couple slides here, but essentially imagine that you've got things like all of your infrastructure. So this is just the top left portion because there's a lot to take in at once. So you can see that it's Kubernetes running Docker containers. There's events on the left-hand side. You get things like your kubelet up, kubelet ping. So basically telling you that the health of your infrastructure. Things like all of your working pods per node, as well as your containers per node. So telling you like how much you're fitting into your infrastructure itself. Same thing, running containers, stopped containers. You had things that ran and then stopped, maybe on purpose, maybe not. Maybe this is a metric for you. Things like running containers by pod as a graph over time, making sure like if we're deploying more and more per week, can we actually graph that? Can we show that success, that kind of thing? And the same thing comes down to on-prem to cloud migrations. Like if we've got things running in on-prem Hyper-V, but we want to move some of that to Azure, what's the number in each? So we can start seeing that go down on-prem and maybe go up in the cloud, that kind of thing. So again, same thing here, daemon sets, deployments, replica sets, containers, maybe the meat and potatoes of what AKS monitoring might look like. And again, as you grow, we'll grow with you. As you start getting into controller manager, we can help you there too. Same thing as you start making your own pods, your own definitions. Happy to meet you where you are. Now, this one I specifically want to point out, just because the crash loop back off and OOM are blank. I know it might be a little bit hard to read, but those ones in the middle there that are empty might be fine when you first start, but we've got them monitored already because we know as you grow, this is one of those areas where you start to see things. As you start reducing your quotas to add more and more to your cluster, you'll start to get those out of memory killed errors by pod. And that's just, it's fine. Like it's a normal failure mode that you should expect. But if you haven't charted it yet, you don't know that it's an indicator. So we've charted it for you. So once you get there, you're good to go. Same thing, crash loop back off. So if you start launching containers, let's say you're going through CI/CD and you're launching new products or new microservices and they fail, and they continuously fail, and then they start slowly failing, slower and slower, which is good. It's built into AKS. You want to start tracking those as well, because it could be an indicator that there's something wrong with your deployment. It could be an indicator that something changed week over week in a service, or maybe an upstream or downstream dependency has changed. And because of that, you're getting these crash load backups. So again, we've got it built out of the box. Happy to help you out. So I've got a demo here that I'll probably skip over because it's a little bit long, but basically taking those default dashboards and being able to add those metrics in is the key thing. So being able to tell you that, hey, you've got something for AKS already. If you want to add in Cosmos, happy to help you. Azure SQL, no problem. Blob Store, same thing. Add them in. We can copy and paste between dashboards. Happy to meet you where you are with the dashboards by default.
So can I correlate services together? So if, like, let's say I have a cluster configured for a particular microservice, and then I'm using a Cosmos DB database with the Mongo API to store information from my cluster. Is there a way to take the different elements that make up a particular solution and kind of bundle them together so we get a single pane of glass?
Yeah, definitely. So I think I've got a demo for that. Ignore this dashboard demo that I'm just jumping through here.
Sure.
So basically, I think
you're on time. I'll let you know we got about 9 minutes left, and so
that's what I was seeing. Yeah, with an interest of time here. So what I'll do is just talk a little bit about tracing. So again, apologies, I just jumped all the way through those slides. But I think, Jay, you're great at the segues here. So what I found is very key to maybe more the developer side, or perhaps the ops side that might be linking late into something where there's something already deployed, is being able to tell like what service is talking to what. So when I talk about upstream and downstream dependencies, upstream, I mean services that call you, and downstream, it might be services that you call. And it's key for us to understand those dependencies, and sometimes they might not be documented. So having a picture can be very handy to that. Now in the slides that I quickly jump through, the main key is that once you've got trace IDs set up, be it in your language, so .NET we talked about a little bit before, as well as in your logs, we can start allowing you to drill down and correlate between them. So we're showing kind of a mixture of functions, as well as containers, as well as VMs, a little bit on-prem here. So I'm looking at the ad server. There was an off.NET one in there as well. But giving people that service map to sort of correlate between them is really key. And then all I did was I drilled down into one of them that was having issues. You could tell because it was red. And I want to figure out, like, why is it having issues? And then the same thing as you were saying, like, how do we cascade through those services to figure out what's going on? So I've clicked on this one, and I want to figure out what's happening. So it looks like my Express service is having issues. And specifically, when I drill into it, it looks like Redis is having issues. So what happened was my dev, or maybe me, it could be, decided to supply too many parameters to the Redis call. So we can see that the get parameter has too many. And because of that, I can start drilling down into which service is affected, which is mine, the one that I clicked on in this case. But we can also see how it affected all the other services in the stack that are all instrumented. So basically that way of like rolling everything up. And I'll stop it here because there's quite a bit to go through. But basically, I think the key is that you can actually start correlating between them. That's the key part. I'll just stop this one as well.
Sure.
Yeah.
No.
I could talk forever about this stuff. I love it.
I think I love hearing about it, because these services, you know, I remember having to cobble together so many different things in order to be able to get like a view into what exactly was going on with my infrastructure, be it, you know, a large blog I had to do, or customer stuff, things like that. And having someone to actually have the expertise to say, look, we're going to make this a little simpler for you. And the way we're going to make it simpler for you is give you ways to bring it all into one single pane of glass. And I think that that's ultimately what a lot of us are hoping for, is that single pane of glass exists, so that we don't have to have, like, you know, multiple browsers open just to be able to say, let's find out about an incident. And so one of the things I'd love to just have a quick chat about before we head out, because we got about 6 minutes left. I know that one of the cool parts about Datadog, and I remember it from when I was using it in production for like a big website, is like being able to actually democratize information,
Right.
by creating almost like a timeline, like you imagine in social media.
Right.
Can you tell us quickly a little bit about how that like timeline really empowers teams?
Yeah, so one of the key things, and I think you talked about like running a big website and being able to democratize it. So one of the key things for me was being able to get the data in the hands of people who would want to see it. So maybe not down to like the CPU and memory, but logins per day, being able to show that to like a VP or a C-suite person in your company and be able to see the data. So not look at like your report and the conclusions that you've drawn based on the symptoms that you saw, or maybe your year-over-year results, but actually saying like, here's a link, you can click this, we can share it to you securely. So only you can see this link, but you can actually like, without login, you can see it, you can embed it into a SharePoint dashboard or a wiki or what have you, being able to get that out there. But the main thing I think that you touched on is that timeline. So not just this week, but maybe this week compared to last week, or this month compared to last, this quarter compared to last. We mentioned Black Friday or sales period. Like, what did it look like last year during that time? So in November, how many sales do we have compared to last year? Or how many logins do we have? How many signups do we have? That part is key, because it's a lot easier to talk about the data when you're talking about the conclusions, because guarantee when you're talking to other people in the company, they'll say like, how did you come to this number? Like, let me check the math. Let's look at it as an Excel spreadsheet, that kind of thing. We can actually go through and look at it together. Not only that, but we make it a lot easier to go into the dashboard and edit. So if you want to clone something I've made and then make your own out of it, and like just cut and paste pieces that you need, or maybe the ones that you don't, you just leave them in the old one, you start your new one. We make it a lot easier to do that now. So you can essentially like go in, edit a dashboard, and actually just Control-C, Control-V into your new one. Or if you want to like, if you've got one that's for last week, but you actually want to show week, month, year, you can do the same thing, like just copy paste, edit the time frame, and sort of show those together. And I think the other thing about the graphs is that like a lot of times back in the day when I was monitoring stuff, it was like, what is it doing right now? And right now is definitely interesting. Like, I want to know what's currently happening, but I want to know if this is cyclical. Like, did this same thing happen last week? Like, is it every Thursday that this happens? Or maybe like, is it every lunch hour? Like, maybe everyone hits our site during lunch hour, or maybe they wake up and they hit our site first, or maybe in the IoT space, the first thing they do is like wake up and run a playbook that actually does things like turn on their lights, play the news for the day, that kind of stuff. I want to know about all that. And I want to be able to look at that spike, not just now, but compare it to a different time frame, or compare it over time, and see when it peaks and when it falls. And I can do things like start planning my scaling, adding some, maybe a little bit of leeway in there if I want to add 10%, that kind of thing. So it's very, very important to be able to see the time frame at the same time.
Yeah, I just love, like I said, that idea of democratizing the information and being able to get everything here from Datadog, and being able to communicate it through all these different outbound channels. So being able to create PagerDuty notifications, send things to Microsoft Teams. I think that that's pretty great, and I think that that's helping people who may have to work with the business end of a company be more informed. Mm-hmm. So Ryan, we're just at the end, and let's take a look at how our poll is. And so we've got 33 to 67. Nobody has a complicated situation, but I'm sure they're all complicated in their own way. But anyway, I want to remind everybody, you can sign up for Datadog. It's a free sign up. You'll just provide your email. You'll go ahead and you'll start configuring your Datadog integration with Azure, so you can sign up right here below. And other than that, Ryan, where can we get more information about you, and how can we continue, and anything interesting coming up?
Yeah, I mean, I'm on Twitter, pretty active there. I think the link's on the bottom. So definitely hit me up on Twitter if you've got questions. By all means, I'm happy to help talk about this stuff. I live and breathe monitoring. It's super exciting for me. In terms of things coming up, I think we talked a little bit about the incident management stuff, but I would really, I think it might be worth a look into, or maybe on the SLO side, not specifically with Datadog, but there are other, basically the DevOps resources for what incident management look like, I think are really key for this role. I think we touched on them early on, but basically getting on the same page for that kind of, maybe a war room might be a little bit too severe, but when it comes down to it and you're all talking together, walking through those game days and walking through, maybe it's Failure Friday, what have you, will really set you up to be able to figure out what the SLIs are, which will roll up into your SLOs and help you define what your error budgets are, and then help you actually monitor things when it goes down, if it goes down again, making sure that you're prepared.
Well, Ryan, that's it for us today. Why don't we go ahead and give everybody the big wave goodbye. Thanks a lot, Ryan. I really appreciate your time here today. We learned so much, and we'll be back next week. Got another great guest on another awesome technology that makes your experience with Azure pretty great. So until then, have a great rest of your week, and thanks for your time. We'll see you soon. Bye, Ryan.
Bye-bye. Thanks a bunch.